Tonight we begin with a development that U.S. officials had anticipated, NATO planners had debated, and European allies had quietly feared. A decision that unfolded not over months of diplomatic negotiations, but in a single morning in Berlin. A single morning that rewrote 80 years of German defense doctrine. A single morning that shifted the balance of European security. A single morning that left Washington scrambling to understand what comes next. What Germany did today crossed a line that the Western alliance had hoped would hold. And when that line broke, NATO did not hesitate. They responded with concern, urgency, and a hastily arranged emergency consultation. For months now, there had been signals, not official communiques, not formal diplomatic cables, just signals that Berlin was preparing something unprecedented. Germany has been cautious, yes, but they have been deliberate in their caution. Their moves have followed a certain predictability, a restraint, almost a ritual deference to the post-war order. But what set off alarm bells in Washington this week was that the predictability went silent. Defense analysts who monitor German military policy know the indicators, the parliamentary debates, the ministerial briefings, the coalition negotiations, the sudden cancellation of scheduled NATO exercises, all of that went quiet. And whenever Germany goes quiet on defense matters, it means something is about to get loud. Early this morning, senior German officials detected what they described as a fundamental realignment of strategic priorities, including a defense spending commitment that had not been approached in over 8 decades. These are the kinds of announcements that Germany only makes when they are signaling something very specific. A break from American dependence, a new vision for European autonomy, or a complete reimagining of their role in collective defense. NATO observers didn't know which category this fell into, or whether it fell into all three at once. But what they did know was that Germany was changing posture. And when Europe's largest economy shifts defense posture without extensive allied consultation, even by modest measures, Washington pays attention. The statement issued by NATO headquarters tonight was not normal. It was not routine. It was not symbolic. It was urgent. Official after emergency meeting described Germany's move as historic, transformative, and perhaps most importantly, potentially destabilizing to existing command structures. But strategic announcements only work if allies hesitate to respond. The United States did not. In fact, their response today was among the swiftest we've seen in alliance history. Here's what we know. Within hours of Germany's announcement, the Pentagon requested immediate consultations. These weren't the standard diplomatic check-ins. These were emergency coordination calls, mechanisms that Washington only deploys when they are preparing to reassess fundamental alliance assumptions. Tonight, European security analysts confirmed that Germany launched a comprehensive restructuring initiative on defense procurement, including weapons development programs that had recently been paused pending what officials believe was internal coalition review. Germany acted before traditional NATO procurement channels could establish coordination. They announced independent tank production. They announced accelerated fighter jet development. They announced naval capabilities that were likely preparing to operate beyond traditional alliance frameworks. In other words, Germany targeted strategic independence, the capability that would have made them Europe's dominant military power. This is what made NATO's response so urgent. Germany's shift wasn't just symbolic, it was actionable. It represented the kind of move that could fundamentally alter alliance dynamics if left unaddressed. And Washington, understanding that fully, responded with diplomatic force. Not recklessly, not impulsively, but strategically. They didn't issue public condemnations. They didn't threaten economic consequences. They convened emergency consultations. They dispatched senior officials to Berlin. And here's where the story becomes even more significant. Intelligence analysts now believe that Germany's latest move was designed to test the cohesion of NATO leadership after years of American political uncertainty. Germany wanted to see whether Washington would respond with confusion. But instead, the opposite happened. The Biden administration didn't hesitate. They issued a diplomatic response that was so swift, so coordinated, that even Berlin noticed. You don't get Germany's attention easily. But today, Washington did. Defense officials speaking with NBC News under anonymity described Germany's shift as strategic repositioning, a way to establish European defense autonomy. But the United States proved today that they remain both engaged and watchful. Their diplomatic outreach was not only rapid, it was calibrated so precisely that Berlin received the message within hours. That timing matters because it shows Washington's intelligence apparatus was already tracking this development. It shows that the United States is not a passive observer. They are an active participant in shaping what comes next. As reports continued coming in throughout the evening, we learned more about the scale of Germany's announcement. The Bundestag approved defense spending increases, forcing a constitutional budget revision. The Ministry of Defense targeted procurement contracts that had been frozen in the last 18 months. German military officials operating across NATO command structures reportedly began reviewing integration protocols used by allied forces to coordinate operations. This wasn't just increased spending. This wasn't just military modernization. This was strategic realignment. This was a declaration of European defense independence. And European defense independence is the one thing NATO has struggled to balance since its founding. For every integration effort they have made, national interests have countered with something that complicates unified command. Remember, Germany thought the post-war consensus would hold indefinitely. They thought American leadership would remain constant. They thought European defense could remain dependent on NATO's existing framework. But tonight, the exact opposite is happening. Germany is asserting unprecedented military autonomy. European allies are scrambling to understand implications. And the United States is recalculating what partnership means. What makes this moment so consequential and so volatile is that Germany's latest move happened at a time when Chancellor Scholz is under extraordinary domestic pressure. The Green Party wants environmental priorities protected. The FDP wants fiscal restraint. The opposition wants accelerated rearmament. German industry wants defense contracts. Scholz is balancing these demands while managing coalition fragility. And when leaders in that position make sudden moves, they're not doing it from strength. They're doing it from pressure. They're doing it from vulnerability. NATO's emergency statement, now circulating among member capitals, was designed to signal that the alliance is not willing to allow uncoordinated defense restructuring. Officials said plainly that Germany's announcement was inconsistent with established consultation procedures. That is diplomatic language for they didn't tell us this was coming and we're concerned. You don't usually hear that tone from NATO unless something serious is at stake. Meanwhile, Germany's chancellor addressed the Bundestag in a measured, historic speech tonight. He said Germany cannot remain dependent on decisions made in other capitals. He said European security requires European capability. And he said, the era of strategic hesitation is over. These are not rhetorical flourishes. These are statements from a nation that understands just how high the stakes have become. Here's what makes the situation even more concerning. Germany's latest move wasn't isolated. Along with the defense announcement, France also accelerated nuclear modernization programs. Poland increased eastern border deployments. European Union officials increased coordination targeting independent defense procurement. All of this happened within the same 72 hours. When major European powers move multiple pieces at once, it means something larger is underway. Analysts are now considering several possibilities. One is that Germany is preparing for reduced American commitment. Another is that Germany is attempting to establish European defense leadership. A third possibility, the one worrying officials the most, is that Germany is attempting to create alternatives to NATO command structures. But today, Washington took that concern seriously. They didn't dismiss Berlin's announcement. They didn't minimize its significance. They didn't wait for formal explanations. They engaged immediately. What we're watching now is a test of alliance cohesion. Germany wants to see whether Europe can defend itself independently. The United States wants to show that partnership remains essential. NATO wants to prevent fragmentation. And European citizens want to prevent a return to continental rivalry. Tonight, we've heard from senior officials who are now monitoring German military communications. They say coordination channels remain open. They say German officials have agreed to emergency consultations. And they say Germany's decision to restructure is likely part of a broader European sovereignty initiative intended to reduce dependence on American political cycles. But Washington is not retreating. In fact, Washington is doubling down on engagement. Their response today, swift, coordinated, and diplomatic, sent a message to Berlin that unilateral moves will be met with immediate attention. And it sent a message to NATO that American leadership remains committed. As the week goes on, we expect more details to emerge about what exactly Germany hoped to achieve. But what we do know is that NATO's response was timely. It prevented immediate alliance fracturing. It established channels for coordination. And it signaled that consultation matters. What happens next will depend on what Germany does in the next several weeks. If they return to traditional coordination, this moment will be remembered as a wake-up call. If they continue independent restructuring, NATO has already shown they are prepared to adapt. They have shown they are ready to respond. Now, for the first time in decades, Germany appears to be charting an independent course. Berlin is quiet, too quiet. And when Germany is quiet, it means they are planning. It means they are choosing their next move carefully. Because tonight, Germany learned something they have suspected for years. The post-war order is evolving. American commitment is not unconditional. And European security ultimately requires European leadership. This story is far from over. But tonight, one thing is clear. Germany has changed. The alliance is adapting, and the world is watching. And we will be here watching every detail as the next phase unfolds.